Okay, so we're going to move into a Q&A session and then some table talk time as well. So we're going to start with questions that you may have of anyone this morning, of John and Travis or of Jim and Carol Sue. So questions, raise your hand. I will bring you the mic. Or comments. Megan from the O'Connor Group.
Thanks, everybody. That was great this morning. Question for you. What was the biggest initiative that you did with Whitepenny that showed the greatest ROI for your business?
Probably, we never did any social media until really 8 years ago, maybe 7 years, 8 years. Just communication to our network, and really telling everybody internally to build their own LinkedIn page, because we didn't do LinkedIn at all. You know, we made sure everyone had 1,000 different contacts. You share all the messaging out to your 1,000 contacts. Some of us do and some of us don't. And really allowing John the flexibility to really get the messaging across. We do roundtables with different people in the company to get, just one-liners. What's the next thing for Zeramis? It could be anything. But really, I think the amount of response or views went from very few to, probably 100 now, which is, more than we typically get. And also access with those to the website directly gives them the access to go into our contact page and really fill out, hey, I have an issue, or whatever it is, and capture that information.
I think that goes to the topic of social media in general. Obviously a B2B business, and so, sort of in terms of social media, finding the right channel to speak to your audience. And in this regard, obviously building a network and a fabric that leverages a very professional network of LinkedIn players allows them to drive traffic, not only and build their social network that way, but also drive traffic back to their main website, microsites, and subpages where those people are seeking very specific information. So going back to this idea of how do we very quickly and very efficiently connect with somebody, provide them with information they're seeking, but then get them back to an experience where they can consume, transact, learn more, whatever it is that they're looking for.
Just one piece on that too. I think you mentioned, Travis, the word friction earlier. I think what we're always looking for, like the strategy that supports any decision, is saying, why are we doing this and what is it helping us achieve as a company? And I think for Zeramis, any conversation around social was saying, it started at a time when they were looking really small, and it was saying, what does it mean to look like the next level of company? Well, you have to check a bunch of boxes. People are looking for different data points, and they're making very quick decisions about you. So when they do that little audit, they check out a social media channel, they check out a website, they check out email blasts, they're looking at these things, they're making decisions. And the job is to really control all of those decisions. So I think that's how I would look at it.
And it strikes me that we are really good at making connections in person, be it at conferences, with clients coming on site. So it was using Whitepenny to, either through branding, through social media, help us demonstrate that in a different, forum.
It really was also the very infant stages of our social media outreach. I sat down with John and said, do we go for the jugular on this and talk about how our competitors are so bad and how we're so good, or are we going to go in a different direction? Because I was so frustrated at that point with their message about us, and it was indirectly, you could read through the lines. How are we going to go capture that? And we took the higher road, which was the smarter move, because I wanted to put a kid inside of a crib saying, "Are you prisoner to, your packager?" So, and John really curtailed that by saying, let's look at it in a different direction, and that's what probably makes our partnership with Travis and John and the rest of the Whitepenny team is we've worked, and that's the key there, is to work with your branding company. It's not going to be overnight. It's taken years, so he understands our business and our clientele and also our competition. When he's developing, is it our third website now? Yeah. Our third website, he knows. He doesn't even have to ask me who my competitors are. He knows exactly who they are. He can go through their websites, get their messaging, and how we're gonna transition, or what their messaging is, and how we're gonna change our messaging from their messaging.
I think it's important that, it's through that partnership that we can say, hey, let's go back to your core. Let's make sure whatever we're doing, however we're positioning you, not just honors the core, but then aligns your business strategy as well as your communication and your brand position to leverage that which is differentiated about you. So it's understanding where you came from, the flexibility, the hand-holding, the accessibility, but then wrapping it in a global brand and saying, hey, the big guys can't compete here, but you all, can own this world and at the same time be effective by being global and looking global.
And one of the things that I've learned and along the way working with Whitepenny is you kind of have to have somebody, and we don't have it currently, and it's something that I need to hire, is someone who can push their ideas into the business, because John will call me and say, hey Jim, where's this, that, and the other. I'm too busy doing what I'm doing, and there's no one really helping John create content at this point, other than a handful of us at Zeramis. I need to hire somebody at this point, be it a marketing project manager that can basically wrangle cats, because we're all doing so many different things constantly, whether I'm out of the country, so the key there is to find a point person within your company that you're going to go to a branding company with that can, has the bandwidth and the ability to get the messaging through the business. John knows very well that after this meeting, we're going to have a 25-minute meeting, because he's got us both in one location for the first time in a very long time. So we'll go through a list of quick questions and our next moves. And that's the other thing, working with a good partnership with your branding company. I know this is about question and answering, is the trust that they're going to ask you, what's the next thing? Why you're building what you just thought was the next thing. They're asking you constantly, what's your mission? Are we selling in 10 years? Are we selling in 5 years? What does that look like?
I think, Jim, you just touched on it a little bit, but Travis and John, knowing you guys work with companies across various industries, can you talk a little bit about your process for understanding the different industries, especially as it pertains to social media and LinkedIn posts and using the different nuances of the industries and projecting that out to the public?
Yeah, I'll start. It's funny, we were just having this conversation in the break. We're doing a ton of research first these days, because I think what we've learned, one, is that, for us, we need to really understand the business. And we're talking about, we work across industries, so this is a perfect example of a very niche market, pharmaceutical clinical trial packaging, to really understand not only what it's about, how to differentiate, but the nuance in voice that's required to kind of speak on a company's behalf. But I think the biggest thing is not making any decisions in a vacuum. So what we've been trying to ensure is that all of the things that a company says about themselves, why are you differentiated, why are you great, why do people like you, let's test those and make sure that that's actually what your customer or client cares about. Because I think Travis mentioned this earlier, it's no longer about saying, I'm just going to talk about ourselves and push that out there. It's really saying, what is that buyer looking for from you? So we're spending a lot of time up front doing market research, having direct interviews with customers, clients. We're talking to people who didn't hire clients of ours. That's the best conversation. You went somewhere else. Why? What helped you make that buying decision? And then all of that informs what is the ultimate brand strategy. So I would say it's a look inward, look outward approach first, and then build a strategy on top of that.
Yeah, and I would say there's two big keys, no matter who you work with. Number one, being able to understand business strategy and business models in particular, right? So if you can understand as a advisor, as a counselor, if you can understand business models and you can understand business strategy, I can operate across industries, right? Because I have the ability to distill down How do you literally drive cash flow, right? And why is your business, how do you compete? Is it commodity, or are you competing on exclusivity, right? And then starting to understand that. Equally as important, by working across industries, we get a ton of exposure to ideas that are working, say, in a business to consumer context that actually need to be shifted over to B2B. So what do we mean by that? Throughout the pandemic, we literally accelerated digital transformation and digital adoption probably by a decade in 18 months to 2 years. Literally, all these things we did as consumers got us in the habit of experiencing things in the digital realm that we might have been reluctant to do in a B2B context prior. So now we have to look at best of breed business to consumer models and say, what's appropriate and what can we shift over here, understanding what your business model is and who, what industry you operate in, and adopt pieces of it, not all of it, but pieces of it that make sense. There's a reason why we like Netflix, PayPal, Amazon, and a lot of that is time shifting. They save you a ton of time, right? How do we create efficiencies in a B2B context, understanding and leveraging those ideas or those concepts, not necessarily saying, okay, now we've got a B2B business and we got to put them in a B2C box, because that might then create problems. But operating across industries for sure gives us ideas on how to sort of leverage best practices, but really also understanding these concepts of how do you get to a superpower, which is really just understanding business models and how somebody competes and how they differentiate at a kind of a core business strategy perspective, is a big plus.
Dan McIntyre from D&K Compliance.
Hey, thanks, guys. How do you create the feedback from your customer to make sure those values that you have established are still important? And then from a trend standpoint, like you're attacking the next trend, or what's important to the consumer tomorrow versus maybe right now?
So back to John's point, and then I'll let maybe you guys dive in how you leverage it. But from a Whitepenny perspective, we actually we've built out over the last few years a consumer insights practice that's led by Amy Henry. And a lot of what we're doing is literally going into the market and through either what we call IDIs, in-depth interviews, and or using digital tools and technologies. We're literally going into the market and talking to end users, consumers, partners, in some aspects, might even be prospective employees, marrying that with other data that we have and trying to really understand, like, what is the market, what are the shifts, what are the changes, what's happening today, what do millennials and Gen Z really think about? They're the future decision makers across all businesses. They're now VPs and above. So how they operate, how they want to establish relationships, what channels they want to communicate on is really important. How they want to consume, but also like what kind of environments do they want to work in, and what kind of brands do they want to be associated with.
For Xerox, we did, do you remember a bunch of years ago, a bunch of surveys to say, we're kind of amazing. You see this across industries. People just don't ask. So it was literally saying to a very wide base of your clients, what do you care about? What's going well here? What's not going well here? What do you want to see more of? What's changing in the market? Are there new things we should be considering? And the feedback is remarkable, what you get, like how candid people will be. So I think there's some just basics of just saying, like, ask the people that you could easily ask. And I think, especially because of the type of company and culture you've built, you had a client base that was very willing to be helpful, like that was really willing to engage in that conversation. Oh, anything from your side, guys, that you would?
You guys can speak more to that and how you've made decisions.
I think, too, like Travis said, Amy, we haven't done it yet, but we definitely need to do a bigger kind of competitive analysis on our landscape. I mean, now that we have, I don't know, how many clients do you think we have? 140 clients, different pharmaceutical companies. So within those clients, okay, could be 4 people, it could be 10 people, it could be 20 people that maybe I don't just work with, but Carol Sue may work with somebody different. Someone's working with our UK office or our Netherlands office or our finance team. How are our proposals written? Are they easy? I mean, simple questions like that to get feedback on. What can we do differently on our website? What would you like to see? Or, if you call our phone right now, and we could in the U.S., someone's actually picking that phone up. Does that make a difference? There's so many things that, and I think that's just growing with Whitepenny on those different aspects that we can, lean on them to gather that information. We have, we have 150 different NDAs, MSAs, that are working that we can't even crosstalk. So it's got to be a blind study, really, what it comes down to, because we can't, know who said what.
Thank you. Just curious, and I thought it was interesting in your story that the messaging changed from, we need to show our customers that we have these capabilities to compete with the biggest companies out there, to hold on a second, we're losing some of our family value identity and we need to shift back to that somewhat. Just curious how you think through that, where you're staying ahead of it, but you're not changing too often where it's creating confusion in the industry.
Maybe I misspoke if I said we were pulling away. I think it's more just constantly looking at the message that's out there and how close it reflects where you are now, but also where you want to go. I think we've been fortunate because, for the past easily 10 years, we've constantly been looking at change, like organic change in the company, which forced us to look at how we were portraying ourselves. A simple example, the evolution of our business card has changed over the past couple of years, and not for a reason that we didn't like it or something, but it was intrinsically tied to knowing that we hand out business cards a lot because clients always come to audit us, see us. So we have easily a visit almost every week, 40 weeks out of the year kind of thing, or when we're traveling, so people know. So the business card ended up being a vehicle to reinforce your brand, your image. We also redid our logo, and there was a whole process there in going through that. But I think it was all born out of organic change that we're fortunate enough has been consistently happening. So we've talked today and mentioned opening our third facility in the Netherlands, but even before we were inspected on February 8th, we've acquired more space here in the U.S. to further expand the U.S. And beyond that, we have additional growth plans. So it triggers looking at how you're portraying yourself and the means by which you're portraying yourself to customers, to employees.
I think there's different ways of telling your story. I don't think I need to sit there and, when you go to the About You page now, and sit there and spew the entire history of my father and mother-in-law anymore. Because really Carol Sue since 2010 has made it her company. It just happened to be established by my in-laws. And now, since they've now left the business since 2010, she's made it what she thinks the company, the second iteration, lack of better terms. So when I say, we're kind of getting away from the family messaging, that could be a simple timeline. Very easy, interactive timeline on your webpage. That you don't have to have 100 words about how Peter and Loretta started this company in 1988. It could be just simple and practical. So that's the direction we're going as far as trying to get that messaging, but make it interactive. And then on top of that, that timeline will go into every single one of our facilities as a branding piece. So when you walk in the front door, whether it's the UK, Netherlands, or the US, you'll see that timeline. So you go, oh, I remember that on the website, it's right here. So there's just kind of like that mental kind of remembrance.
So, to your point, it used to be the About Us page and you're reading about it, but we now have enough history where we can make it a timeline and then talk about where and how we'll use the timeline, which alone having the timeline denotes a different level of business to the consumer.
Sam, I think too, just one piece on top is that we're always looking at any given moment in time, what is the messaging about at its core? So from 2010 to 2015, it was Xeramis had something to prove. Like we needed to say, like, we're playing at this level. We use the word global constantly. 15 to 20 was saying, okay, you are that now. You can sort of throttle back on that a little bit. I always liken messaging to like a soundboard. If you're like mixing music, you have all these levers, and it's at any given point you're going to push and pull on a different lever. So it was all in on global. We're big. We can do anything. Now you've built that, you could pull that one down, and we're going to say, well, now we want to kind of go back into, we're super hands-on, super agile, super high touch. We can go against these juggernaut companies and do something they can't do. So it's kind of figuring out that mix at any given point.
I think it's a really interesting topic, though, given the audience, which is family-owned and multi-gen. And these are conversations that happen. So we talk a lot in sort of generational transfer of ownership, and what does that mean? But it's also, what's the brand that's required to help the second or the third generation be successful? And how do you position to drive where that, the current ownership needs to take their business? We have a great client that we've been working with for almost 20 years, the Severino Pasta Company, now run by the second gen. And it's a fascinating story of, what was built, where they are today, and where they're going as they head to the third generation. And it was really a conversation that John helped frame between the first generation and the second generation, which was a very regional business, a very successful business that the second gen wanted to take national and then ultimately, international via the internet. But the brand that has to be established to move from regional to available in every Whole Foods coast to coast in every region of the United States is very different than the brand and the brand position and the brand story that was being told and was rightfully being told to build the first generation of the business. And managing those conversations are not always easy, not always tricky, and they're often tricky. But having the flexibility, allowing the freedom for the current generation, current ownership to take the brand and the business where it needs to go to be successful, but not necessarily forgetting who you are and what your core is, and where, like John said, where you dial up your advantages and your superpower is really sort of, that's the balancing act.
That's really excellent. Because I know most of us want to work or do business with family businesses. You trust them. And so how to know how to put that, how to get that message out and when to go up and down on that. I know some of you really focus on the family-owned business. So any questions around, any other questions? And then we'll take it back to John and Travis. Okay.
I would say, I always think about these conversations to think about the takeaway of, like, if I were, you're kind enough to spend time here and listen to a great conversation. I would say that for me, it would be just boiling it down to that idea. If you went back and you look at your business and you say, why you started, right? The origin story is easy to get to. But then the layer on top of that is, what are we really good at? Like, why you believe in it, and you believe in it, I think, to Carol Sue's point, in a very personal way because it's yours. Name it. Like, really say, like, this is the thing. Could you as a team sit down and say, this is the thing that we do, to what Travis said, that is hard to replicate, hard to buy, hard for someone else to do. And that really becomes the cornerstone, the foundation of the brand story. So I think it's like a simple, superpower is just a really great framework for how to find that thing. The piece that we always talk about with our clients is that the job of an external consultant is never to come in and tell you who you are. You know what that is. So it's just helping tease it out. And I think in conversations with your team, with your family, you could get to that thing. And the piece I would always add with that is push a little deeper than the surface level, right? They're always the surface messages where you're going to say, well, we're great at service, right? Service is the go-to one for everyone. And I think in the Zerima story, what you heard is, it is service, but it's really about the agility and the flexibility to do the thing that other companies won't do. That's their superpower. Like they will, and it let them exist in a phase 1 world to move up to phase 2, to run phase 3 and build a reputation around being hands-on, highly consultative, highly agile. So push a little deeper and I think try to find that thing. That would be, I think, our parting words.
I was just going to add that I remember when we were first looking at a branding company, and we looked at a couple of companies, some big companies in Philadelphia, and hopefully I share with you, we're good at messaging to people in front of us, that's our business, but we really needed to partner with a company that could externally help us message, and we were fortunate enough to find Whitepenny, and they've been tremendous in working with us, and as John said, to a degree, pushing us to ask different questions, to think about things that would enable them to help us better create that whole brand and messaging that we want to as a company in the arenas that we can't because it's not person to person.
That's kind of it.
And I would simply leave you by saying, as you go back and potentially think about your superpower as a company, especially for the family-owned and the multi-gen that are here, I would argue I don't think there's ever been a better time to be a family-owned business than right now. And the reason I say that is, when you look at the headlines, when you look at what's going on in the world, you look like what's going on locally. When you think about the experience we just came through as it relates to COVID, in times of dislocation, in times of disruption, people seek that which is familiar, which I would argue is family. So there's a tremendous opportunity out there to leverage the family-owned nature of your business and your brand to not just drive business and growth, but to attract and retain talent. All we hear about is, oh, this technology company had this many layoffs. This technology company had that many layoffs or got rid of this percentage of their workforce. Well, the reality is, we know firsthand by working with family-owned and multi-gen businesses, they're like, hey, come work for us because we've got a lot of job openings across the board and we need you. So as the big companies, the faceless companies are creating issues, leverage your superpower and infuse the family to drive advantage for yourselves.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Travis, Jim, Carol Sue, and John. This was very invaluable. Let's give them a round of applause. And if you are a member, you can take advantage of a brand audit sprint that John and Travis are offering. So just give us a call or give them a call.